Welcome to Connected Conversations. I'm really grateful that you're here and sharing your time. If you like the conversation that you hear, please like it and share. I'm Emma from Unique Phoenix. I'm a soul coach, energy healer, well-being guide, and an unapologetic, curious soul. Connected Conversations is here to bring love, healing, and connection to our everyday lives through open and authentic conversations. Every single conversation, I'm privileged to interview women and men in our communities that are here being their authentic selves, sharing their unique talents with the world around them. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then we can get to know them and what they offer much better.
My name is Chris Hall. I'm an entrepreneur of 20 odd years, sort of playing around in the business of tech and all things sort of happy, loving things, and currently working with the City of Casey on a startup innovation program to be able to help other business owners navigate their way through the fun stuff of life. So great to be here.
Welcome to Connected Conversations, which is here to bring love, healing, and connection through and to our everyday lives through open and authentic conversations. And today I'm joined by Chris Hall, who is an absolute legend of a human, a guru when it comes to startups and also businesses that need to pivot. I've personally worked with Chris through community projects and my own business pivot as well, and know that if you're in business to start up and to really promote and be passionate about what you do, you're going to walk away with some absolute gems today. So welcome, Chris. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me. Absolute, when I say absolute legend, because you're so generous. And I don't just mean with your time, but also with the information that just pours out of you. So generous about what you offer people, and you're so happy and extremely gifted in what you do. So we'll just let you fit into the screen now because I have talked you up a fair bit. But Chris has definitely helped me in my own business. So look, I'm so thrilled to be able to share it with you guys today. I want to start with your business background because I know a little bit of it, but it's pretty interesting, and the path that led you to work with the City of Casey, to work in council.
So thank you for having me, Miss Emma. It's fantastic to be here on a Friday afternoon. It's cold outside, so I've got my nice coffee, and couldn't imagine a better place to be on a Friday afternoon.
Excuse me, I've just swallowed the wrong way. For those listening, sorry to, and for those watching, sorry to see that. Woo, I'll just take my tea to the side. That's never happened before. Yes, you're right. We're here on a beautiful Friday afternoon. It's actually when Connected Conversations gets released, but whenever you're listening and watching, it's going to be a good one. So we're like 20 years you've been an entrepreneur. So can we get a little bit of background?
Look, if you say entrepreneurs are born, then it's 47 years an entrepreneur. Over 20 years in the mostly within the consumer electronics industry. So really as a passion, the kind of through early teen years all the way through to when it started to work out, there was opportunity to be able to tie passion with money earning. We kind of moved into the world of consumer electronics, and then through that path. Basically sort of came through the whole world as we're seeing it come together now with the Internet 2.0 boom, and so the birth of smartphone, and then where that was going with internet connectivity, so the Internet of Things, big data, cloud connections. So as you said at the start, not what you'd call a linear career path. It was more, there's something interesting over there, and curiosity drive me to those corners of the universe. Just really found myself exploring exploring different paths and opportunities along the way. So, and yeah, it's really only on reflection that you get to sit back, and they always say you know, you remember the romantic kind of honeymoon moments, the best, and kind of forget about the battle wounds and the scars along the way, of which there's many. It's part and parcel of being a business owner. But I've got to say I'm fortunate enough to have been able to work with a lot of really clever people along the way, who have taught me a lot of stuff as I've gone through that journey, and yeah, really just sort of learned to navigate that piece through, which now allows me the role that I'm doing today, which is actually working with other entrepreneurs, and hopefully, yeah, avoiding some of those battle scars that I had to endure, and yeah, get them to really see that what we call a vision to version pathway, because as an entrepreneur, you're wired in a way to kind of view the world of seeing problems. So you start to sort of form a vision around what that would look like, and then ultimately taking that to a version. And yeah, that's the exciting little world that I like to live in, is that early stage bending, molding, you know, the world around you, to then form opportunities out of that. So
I love that, because it's so true. Your own journey. I mean, even in, you know, the soul work that I do, yeah, my shitty little path of life at times, you know, allows me that privilege and honor of working with someone to, you know, amalgamate all that information and all those lessons that I've learned into giving them a nicer package. And you know, like you said, to absolutely avoid perhaps some of the pit holes. But wouldn't you agree? I don't, well, not wouldn't you agree? I don't like to lead people, but aren't some of those pitfalls like the best bits? You know, do you want to avoid them fully? Because, you know, if it's all sunshine and moonbeams.
Look, it's a very Buddhist way of looking at it. The idea that life is struggle, and you know, that's where the lessons are learned, is actually going through those stages of dealing with struggle and understanding what that looks like. Look, yes, you're right. I think you know, ultimately, it's about probably not so much avoiding the pitfalls. It's about soft landings. If I can put it another way. So
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So that idea, and it's a very Silicon Valley way of kind of thinking, where they use that term, fail fast, fail often. But it's really built into this culture, an idea of run. You know, run as fast as you can, and kind of you know, make stuff happen, and have momentum there. But fail fast, fail often. What's really the core basis of that idea is that inevitably not everything is going to work. In fact, I remember a fantastic interview I saw years ago, Eckhart Tolle, and he said it beautifully. He said he could review every movie ever made with just 3 words, and those 3 words are shit goes wrong. And he said, if you think about life and the struggle of life, that's effectively this strange dichotomy that we have within us, that, you know, we require certainty, but we crave uncertainty. So we would require that piece to us, the kind of, okay, I get it, I know what I can lean on, what I can't, what I can take for granted, what I, you know, those pieces in your life that you kind of know with, you know, with certainty. But we crave that level of uncertainty that allows us to have the, you know, the spice of life, the variety piece that you need. So, but yeah, ultimately, yeah, as I said, it's a very Buddhist way of looking at life, to say, you know, allow people to evolve through the struggle. But yeah, look, they're part and parcel of it.
I mean, you're really talking about ego versus soul, because soul is ever changing and ever evolving, and likes the mischief of life, and, you know, the curiosity, and you know, but the ego is like, no, let's keep things the same because I feel safe. I don't like change. But when you've got the two working together, so I mean, in business, it's a beautiful way to look at it. Actually, I've never looked at it like that. Oh my God, I just learned something. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Look, and I was having a very similar conversation with somebody else the other day, and you know, made the observation that I truly believe this, that entrepreneurship and you know, being a business owner is actually the ultimate form of self-discovery. There's nothing else in life that will present you with the same kind of challenges that you face as a business owner. So that whole piece around having to lead with empathy. So every problem that you're moving into, you kind of lean into that space, not just looking at it through your lens, actually getting an appreciation of that lens of others, and then driving all of that decision making underpinned by curiosity, recognizing that there is always more than one solution to the problem. So allowing yourself to be able to think laterally as opposed to literally, and then combining that with the ability to be able to empathize. Generally speaking, you'll go through life using those skills, intuitively. But what business will do is actually force you to use those skills where you need to kind of bring yourself back into check every now and then. Otherwise, yeah, you'll head in the wrong direction and kind of wake up one morning and say, how did I end up here? Yeah.
Well, and it's so easy to do, like, as you know, and also it's part of that backing yourself, isn't it? Like, you can easily get distracted and stuff. And I absolutely was so good at it last year, like looking, and some of it was really good distraction and it allowed me to open up, but others I was like, I'll look back and think, what are you doing? Like, no, that's a no. Don't do that. So yeah, you've got to have that. Yeah, I like that, the vision to version, because you do need to come back to a why. I think in most conversations with anyone business related on here, there's always coming back to the why. Why are you doing this? Because like if it's not important to you and you don't know why you're doing it, and if it's just for money, it's probably not going to be. So.
And even within those two simple words of vision to version, there's also, I guess, a deeper understanding that's needed within that as well. That, when we talk about vision to version, we're talking, first of all, that very defined, clear understanding of where it is that you want to go. And as amazingly simple as what that sounds, you'd be very surprised how many people haven't quite developed that yet. So it doesn't necessarily always start up with waking up with an epiphany and following that journey. Defining that vision piece and actually having real clarity around that. And version is by definition not perfection, and that's the other piece that needs to be recognized within it. So as a business, where do I start on this? If you're aiming for perfection, you'll always fall short. So vision to version is about saying, well, what is it that I'm actually trying to do here? And how do I come up with a version of that then allows me to be able to do the same thing, rinse and repeat over and over again in many different iterations.
Yes.
And grow your business from there.
Yeah, no one, if anyone's listening, you're not going to see my face go, oh my God, yes. Like, that was a big moment for me a couple of years ago to look at what I do and to go, I can actually apply this in other areas, but not change what I'm doing, the purpose of it. So that was really interesting, because as a coach, I think you kind of, encouraged to have lots of different stuff going on and to look like you offer lots of different stuff. But really, I offer, there's three main areas that I work within. So that's what I do. And they can look in different applications, but really it's what I do. So, and recently I brought it down to soul and gone, actually it's soul work. And there's three ways I offer it, and I can offer it to different audiences though. So, that was like mind blowing.
I think, even you mentioned earlier about that ego piece, and, I congratulate you on using ego in its proper reference there, of more so identity, as opposed to, that piece of arrogance almost that people see ego as. But as an entrepreneur, there's actually pieces of both that need to coexist, which is a very strange place to live sometimes, because that identity piece again needs to be very clearly defined, but there almost needs to be an unreasonable expectation of your abilities to be able to deliver on something. Otherwise, you're constantly going to be faced with the imposter syndrome that sits behind that. Feeling I'm moving into areas that are not necessarily meant to be or what I wanted to do. But you need to have this sort of grounded self-confidence that gives you the ability to be able to push through that when the world's kind of saying to you, you can't do this. You can't just step out and say, yeah, I can. Yeah.
Well, that's what you're talking about, soul there. So soul's the curious, confident, piece to you that says, do it anyway. Don't worry about it, mate. You'll be fine. And it's your ego that says, oh, I don't know about that because I don't know how it's going to work, like, and it gets all, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, I talk about ego a lot in work, and I have to keep saying to people, I'm not saying you're egotistical. Ego is our personality. It's just part of how we exist in the world. So, get to know it, roll around in it. But it's when it's running the show, it's not the best part of it, because you can't move forward if you're living through ego. You just cannot. But soul's so curious that it just goes, oh, look, there's a little bird flying over there. Ah, that feels good. I'm going to go have a look at that. Oh, there's an ice cream truck. Let me go, that's the soul. Oh, look, there's a tree growing, like it just... It's fascinated by that. And so you're right, in business, that's really hard to marry. I want to ask you though, because I'm super curious, being an entrepreneur myself, working for someone else, you went from being in your own business to then working in the city of Casey for a council. And, let's be honest, that's just not working for somebody else. That's like working for a mass organisation that's, Australia-wide, essentially. Like, even though it's its own little entity, it's still running off what the rest of the country is doing, and federally. And so how did you going from that to that?
As with all things on my path, completely unintended. That's
the song.
And really, it was, for me, it was very fortunate timing. I kind of ended up in circles that were, and again, we can go some amazing deep places with this call, and we'll see how long we've got to do.
I love it.
Look, I ended up really at a point where I ended up where I thought I wanted to be. So as I say to everyone, be careful what you ask for, because it might come true. I kind of ended up at this point where I was working with the Mayo Clinic out of the US, which was a very sort of data-driven organisation where they wanted to look at that commercialisation path around how they could take some of that data and turn it into physical objects. IoT, it was built around well-being and purpose, but that involved working with teams out of the US, development teams in India, and then trying to work on an Australian time zone, literally putting in 18, 20-hour days. Start your morning at 3 and you kind of finish at 9 at night. So so we kind of ended up in a world that I thought, this is everything that I wanted to do. Yeah, it's smack bang in the middle of that intersection of new stuff and being able to apply skill and working with teams, and then very quickly off multiple sprints within that cycle, felt a sense of burnout that came with that. So spending a lot more time traveling back and forth, having a family, doesn't really sort of sit with that whole work-life balance for whatever you apply that definition to be. For me, it was just simply I wasn't seeing enough of the people that I loved, which really is a non-negotiable. So always, as far as here in our backyard goes, we moved down to the city of Casey over 20 years ago. So I remember when we moved in, it was very much the end of the line. It was kind of, I'd say to friends, I'm living in, Berwick, and they say, oh, where's that? And so, turn right at the tree and left at the Lazy Cow, and you'll find our house on the hill. It's, now it's grown massively. It's one of the biggest growth corridors in Australia. So what that inevitably means is that you've got a lot of really clever people down here working on some great stuff. So fortunate timing for me, whether it was just fortunate or fate, I just happened to kind of sit back and say, okay, right, what opportunities are available closer to home? And by looking at that, I was lucky enough to find that LaunchVic had actually established a grant funding opportunity for building up the startup ecosystems in north, south, east and west of Victoria. So at the time, very, very much a cluster focus within the CBD, then a fragmented community that sat outside of that. So yeah, I kind of sat back and thought, well, this is really an area where I'm always looking and saying, am I adding value? Am I contributing towards something here that people are getting value from? And looking at that, I thought that maybe that's an area that I can kind of add some value to, yeah, and do something within. So that was literally funding there from the state government for a 12-month program to get up and running on the idea that then the reins would be handed to the local government agency that would take that program and continue to run that. And again, had this conversation with someone just recently and joking that I've now learned that it's a bit like Hotel California. So you can check in anytime you like, but you can never leave. That 12-month agreement turned into now what is coming up on 4 years. Yeah, it continues to grow. When you talk about the differences there in terms of going from the business world into the government world, obviously very different. First and foremost, I remember a very early stage meeting where I kind of sat in the room and got anxiously excited when everyone was talking about short-term outcomes. And so instantly I go into that mode of, right, okay, what are we doing? Go into beast mode here of let's get this together and make it happen. And that realization that their short-term outcomes, they were talking about 12 months, 24 months, 36 months. We're thinking days, and they're thinking in years. So government does work at a different pace, but understandably so. They need to have that bigger picture thinking around where everything's going with a justifiable outcome and to that. But not dissimilar in a way that ultimately is very much a case of building communities. So as with business as well, it's kind of that think of, hey, I've got this idea, let me give it a go, see if there's something here to play around with. It's now my idea I'm sharing with the world. You kind of build a tribe underneath that. People start kind of, working together on that, and it becomes something bigger from there. So no different at all when working across that community peak, that it's about building up that connection and collaboration with people.
Yeah. Which you've done. I mean, your connection across the community, and it can be seen because I probably met you. I think probably met you in the first year of you doing that, or year or two, and you could already see that your connection in the community was such a wide net at that stage. But I do want to ask you, so to say that you are a really impressive networker, really impressive. And also you are a connector. Like when we're talking about what people do in businesses, one of your greatest skills has to be, not saying it's like you haven't got amazing other ones, let's not take those away, but I know, but connecting people, like it's a pretty phenomenal skill to be able to connect skills and, even not managing personality and all that kind of stuff, but understanding who would work well together. And, I love that you do all of that. But I do want to ask, because obviously that was something you were like, oh, great, I can add some value to startups. But 4 years on, you're still there working in council. And, I've worked in lots of community projects for the past probably 6 or so years. And, it's an interesting area to work around and in. What is it that makes you so passionate about working with startups? Like, why? Because it's not easy. It's not easy starting a business. It's not easy keeping your business going. So what is it about working in that?
So a couple of parts to that. I mean, if I had my choice, I would always be working with startups and entrepreneurs because that electric space, when you go from I think this might work as an idea, and how do I make that happen? And I love that piece of kind of I think I remember seeing again a long time ago Steve Jobs kind of talking about that moment when you realize that all of life that you see around you was created by people who are no more smarter than you. And once you realize that you can bend it, you can mold it, you can influence it, you can contribute towards it, there's something special about that. And so when you find like-minded people who are wired in the same way, and they see that ability to be able to contribute something back, That's exciting. So we've given the choice. I would always be working with those new ideas, that electric space of formation into something. But that said, one of the biggest reasons why I guess I am still here and doing the work that we're doing is that COVID, that little thing that happened along the way. But,
just that little blip,
in time. But yeah, look, I mean, what that did was significantly disrupt the world. So, without talking at that macro scale even, but entrepreneurs are constantly, if you truly have a new idea, you're looking to disrupt, and that level of can often be difficult because people tend to live in patterns of business as usual. So in a world where everything had been just broken apart, it was then a matter of looking at it and saying, this is prime fertile soil for entrepreneurs and new ideas and innovation to be able to play a part. And that's really where the role has gone now. So when we look at startups and we say, well, ultimately what defines a startup? So what is that separation between a small business owner and a startup? And it really is that use of emerging technologies, emerging trends, emerging ideas that will potentially sort of change the way that we do things or the way that we think about things. And that is ultimately where we're at collectively as a world right now. So with how you want to call that, the big reset, the great pause, there's lots of different.
What's the other one? The Great Awakening. Oh, that's my favorite. My favorite's the Great Awakening. I like that.
But look at however you look at it, I think ultimately what that's suggesting is that coming out of that, there's opportunity, and then coming out of that allows us the ability to be able to build back better. And I think that disruption allows us to be able to say, well, we were always aware of climate change and how we should be sustainable, but how do I do that when I'm Emily can't come into work today, payrolls are due, have we run that marketing campaign, oh wow, I've got to do this, and where are we at with product build? Like, that's the world that you live in as a business owner. And then somebody comes in and talks about sustainability, you say, I love it, it's great, I love the earth as well, but not right now, can we talk about it next week? And meanwhile 3.5 tons of waste pile up on our shores, and and that's the world that we've been living in, of kind of everything was too complicated to bring into the fabric of business as usual. And this magic opportunity and time that we have now, as devastating as it has been, on this rebuild, is the ability to be able to say, well, it's already broken apart, so while we rebuild it, why don't we fit this stuff in together or where it actually should fit? So can your business actually have a social cause? Can you look at maybe bringing in some of that altruistic endeavor of being able to actually offer back to your community in a way that might have been difficult before because it was not what your business was designed to do? Is there opportunities there to really do those things that seemed too difficult before? And I think the answer for most businesses would be, now's the time to consider that. So I look at that really as that opportunity of, well, innovation is a necessity for the rebuild, because we all need to think about how to do things differently. We also need to recognise that the world has changed as well. So we all, again, intuitively know that we've all changed somehow through this COVID piece. Maybe some of us are going through stages of grief still, so we might be angry about that, we might be in denial, we might be in blame, that everyone's still in a different space around it, but we have changed as people. So to consider for a moment, well, what impact does that actually have on the decisions that I'm making as a business owner? If I've changed, how is that actually reflecting in what I'm doing for my business? But then also recognizing that in all likelihood, your customer has changed as well. And so where does your business sit with that changed customer? So there's a lot of pieces to unpack in that that I don't think necessarily happen overnight. And so I think that's the bit around, started for 12 months and 4 years later, I'm still here, is that the role is constantly evolving in that respect. And sort of moving into different stages, and inevitably COVID kind of accelerated some of that a little bit further. But Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely did in my business, and you were like definitely a good kick, a little push in my back to make me look at my business in a really different way, which is really, and you're right, it is such a different platform for, and even presenting with businesses, it's not the same process anymore. It's, there is that opportunity to go in and say to businesses, look,
Hmm.
you got to change, mate. Like, you can keep going the way you want to, but like we've all changed, and that's going to start to evolve. I call it evolving. You're calling it innovation, but my human aspect, because I'm not in the technology realm, is evolving, and people are evolving. Some moving through grief, as you mentioned, massively. However, many people are starting to evolve and look at the world in a different way. And you mentioned before, just that point around having that balance with family and work, and sustaining 18 hours a day is great when you're in this single, no anyone around me. But when you've got a love tribe that you're within, you want to hang out with them, and you want to be in their company. So that's also, I'm segueing into a question if it's happened naturally. I love that. And because
Well done.
when we talk
Done this
about
before.
when we're talking about that kind of balance within business, I refer to it as well-being when I'm speaking with clients, because well-being is a mind, body, soul thing, and businesses have that as well, because we've got people working in them.
Hmm.
So whilst we have people working in them, what's some business well-being advice that you would give?
That's a big one.
I know, I wrote it going, I don't know where this is going to go.
Because I mean, obviously, it's going to be very bespoke for the type of business you're talking about, and what kind of challenges they're going to be faced with. I think again, there's going to be some universal things that we all need to consider here, and there's a lot more conversation around now on mental health. Generally speaking, still kind of confined to this idea of sort of anxiety and depression, and understandably so. We're creatures that need to simplify complexity. So we kind of, if we can put a label on it, attach some generalizations and assumptions underneath, then we can box it as an idea and say, okay, we get that. Now let's discover something else. So I think this idea around recognizing that mental health is going to be a key piece of that, coming back to the workplace, getting your people back together and working together. But then not just necessarily looking at it as a black and white kind of issue of are they anxious so they don't want to come back to the office, or they're a little bit sad at the moment, so that's early signs of depression. But the complexity underneath that is overwhelming for most businesses, so they will want to simplify it. But on the positive side of that, we're talking about it, so now there's a lot more understanding and a lot more appreciation of that sort of mental health piece within the workplace. So I think it sounds very wishy-washy to say approach your rebuild with gratitude and understanding. There does need to be a piece of that. Now, I'm kind of looking at it and saying, well, there's something to be learned around what's happened here over the last 2 years. For many, it's a simple thing around dependencies and contingencies. So a business always has things that they're dependent upon, and you don't really stop and pause and look at those and consider what contingencies would be. So your plan B for all of those dependencies was never really something that you needed to consider. The rainy day hadn't come, but COVID came. And all of a sudden, we were looking at those rainy day plan Bs, and many businesses discovered they didn't have plan Bs. They didn't have that, well, that's a massive dependency for our business, and now we don't have that. What do we do? Where do we go? So when I say gratitude, it's looking at it and saying, well, what this opportunity has allowed me to be able to do is to sort of look at that, and to be able to say there's areas that I need to work on within that. And then really that compassion piece that needs to be carried through into there. Yeah, I mean, these are life conversations, not just business conversations. of just
I
dealing
agree.
with people,
I agree.
that piece around it. But I think that's going to be such an important part of business moving forward, is that appreciation of people's circumstances, situations, and what that all kind of looks like when you build that all back.
Yeah, because really, I feel like for me, what I'm picking up what you're putting down is you're talking about injecting the human back into business, because it feels like for a while that we've kind of forgotten about that, and people have become numbers and, you know, checking in and your time and, you know, how much time do they spend on this and this project and that project. And it's all been about, you know, what's happening out here and the work and the keep going. But we've actually forgotten that there are humans behind all of that. And, you know, for some people I know out there working in roles that weren't affected apart from working from home, working in the office, their workloads became a lot bigger and longer. And, you know, their processes, you know, certainly, became a bit of a minefield for them. So the human, I agree with you, going forward has to be what we consider. And there's still businesses out there, so many, that don't actually put the human into the amount of hours people spend on things and the connection that they have and how they're connecting and what that looks like. And gratitude and compassion, I mean, they're two values that I teach because they need to be. We often take things for granted. You know, like you said, this is how business runs, but once you put the human in there, it just changes the perspective so much. But I love that you're talking about mental health. I really look for the day that, and I absolutely put my hand up to be part of that, is looking for soul health in a business, because businesses have a soul. They have a reason why they're doing what they're doing. They couldn't keep going without it. And that's the soul of the business. And underneath that soul of the business is more souls running it. And then underneath that is more souls buying it. We've talked about this before, but I think there's I think it's great in that that's what happened, because a lot of businesses are starting to wake up and understand actually it's a little bit more than what we anticipated, and not in a more bad way, but we've got to put the human back in.
And it's why I love the body of work that you're doing, Emma. It's it's that piece around, I think, inevitably what you find in every crisis is there's I'm picturing the meme that kind of said, you know, the pessimist sees the glass half empty, the optimist sees the glass half full, and the opportunist just takes the glass and drinks what's left. And so I think what we're going to find is that through this crisis is that you're going to have the pessimists, you're going to have the those who kind of look at the positive side as well, but then you're going to have the opportunists who come in and kind of build a platform around that mental health piece. And I think what's required to have these conversations, again, recognise the complexity that sits underneath that, and it's such a great time to be having it. Yeah, like, had you gone in with some of your core ideas into business 4 or 5 years ago, it had come across very kumbaya and kind of, let's all skip through the fields and,
let's slap some fish on people. Yeah. No!
And I think that, the timing of that was because we were in a very different state. Again, university I'm talking here. So, kind of now the opportunity is to really look at that. And it's going to be people like yourself who have a very deep toolkit of understanding to be able to dig into and to be able to kind of walk people through that journey and then fit it in with a commercial acumen as well. So, and it requires both pieces. You can't sort of be heavily weighed on that capitalist endeavour commercial kind of piece, because it's ultimately not focused on people. Yet you can't be completely focused on people without that understanding that ultimately, this needs to fit into company objectives and outcomes. So it's going to take that appreciation of both sides to really, help on that piece, which is, why I'm a big supporter of the work that you're doing. So
yeah, and I think that's the part of it, when you're going in and understanding that there is a business component, there is a structure component of it, but being able to have those challenging conversations around with business owners to draw them back into, that's all great, and yes, you need it, but where's the human in that? Because there has to be the human. and helping them see that aspect of it as well. But yeah, thank you. Absolutely, I love what I do, and definitely with your support and working around it, it's helped me see, you know, how much business understanding I do have anyway, and can draw into it. But yeah, I think you're right. I think, and that conversation is going to get deeper around mental health, because we've put slap this little label on, as you said, mental health, but there's just so much that actually sits underneath it that, you know, that's why I keep talking about well-being, because, you know, we've got to have that holistic perspective of not just, you know, the person, but also the business and, you know, the customer and everything that they're doing in there. And that brings business well-being. But I do love that. And I know that you talk to businesses about that all the time, because you're also talking about that what's your business well-being, having that contingency plan B. What if this doesn't work? What if this? But you know what? There's no more, like, we're not going, oh, that'll never happen. What if?
Yeah, if anything, the world has shown us over the last, you can no longer say that is that'll never happen. Yeah, you know, pandemics and talk of nuclear and there's lots of conversations. Look, I think to the it does tie into that sort of understanding of mental health as well. But the emotional intelligence piece has such an important role now, and more than just companies as well. You know, I'm kind of looking at it and thinking that, again, considering that we now have an opportunity to reconsider what things look like moving forward, as we step into the defining decade, you know, the one thing we can expect in the next 10 years is a lot of change. And I'm firmly of the idea that it will potentially be my kids' kids, you know, kind of talking to them and saying, you know, you realize your dad, you know, used to wake up in the morning and go into a building to learn from a person, and they'd spend, you know, 6 hours there, and then they'd come home, and you know, that one person, you know, with the knowledge that they had, was kind of solely responsible for that level of education of one person. It's such a bizarre idea when you kind of think about that in the context of the world that we live in. So the access to information now and what we have available to us, I think that was one of the signs, or one of the things that really came out of the last 2 years, watching that remote learning piece. And you know, thank God for this format. Yeah, thank God for the ability to be able to have video as well as audio, and learning management systems that sat behind all that. But I think it did show us that idea, as it did with the workplace, that you know, there's opportunities to kind of reconsider what places and spaces look like and the way that we do things. So ultimately, if we are going to relook at that education piece, as to how we do that and how we manage that, I think one of the things we need to talk about is it's not about becoming more knowledgeable. It's about the application of that knowledge that needs to come into learning. So, you know, Elon Musk is the one who says, you know, you can sit someone there all day and tell them about, this is a screwdriver and it's you know, a place like this, but just give them a screwdriver and we'll see what they're going to do with it. Yeah. And give them something to work on, and they'll quickly learn, you know, exactly what a screwdriver is about. So I think there's that level of application of knowledge that we need to look at. Again, this is a conversation in business too, not just education. But I think the bit that we still miss this today is emotional intelligence education, and that recognition now that, you know, no longer the days are gone where you would you know, leave school, start a job, work until you get the gold watch, and then you know, sit on a beach and drink Mai Tai. You know, that perception of a career path is has completely changed. And you know, what we're going to find compounding that is the fact that technology is moving so quickly, and with that rapid change, you know, somebody who comes in who have spent 4 years in uni to become a you know, a lawyer, all of a sudden finds that a computer can actually do the job of a lawyer, 80% of their job, you know, much better than what an individual person can. So we're going to find that the career choices that people make are going to be rapidly changing so quickly, that just a basic level of resilience within that where is that taught? The schools aren't teaching kids how to be resilient.
They're not. They don't have the capacity of it either, and nor do as a parent. I don't know about you. I don't want my school necessarily teaching that. Well, they do. There are some parts. Look, I won't go into it, but I don't agree with what they teach around emotions, because I actually know it, and it actually teaches them to be afraid of negative emotions, and I don't like that, because we have feeling. We can. That's a whole different conversation. I'm very passionate about that, because I do teach emotional intelligence, and the way that I teach emotions is vastly different to anything I've seen. Well, I know it is, so because I've looked, but I agree with you. And here is the other thing: we're talking about having technology. Without the level of emotional intelligence, you can't decipher on here what's real and what's not real. You cannot. And has that not been something, for me anyway, that's massively been highlighted? There is a multitude of people out there still not able to go real, not real, because emotional intelligence is not something that we've fostered. It's not something that we've valued. And so it's not kind of it's a high level skill, but it's kind of low use at the moment. We all have it. Like you and I highly emotionally use our high EQ. Absolutely. However, that's something that we've fostered and learned, and, and people listening, there'll be people out there going, oh, yeah, I use mine. Absolutely you do. If you know what we're talking about, you know what we're talking about. But for those that aren't aware of it, look into it. I would 100% look at whoever you come across, because it's going to transform your life, and we can evolve as much as we want with tech. But until we evolve from within, I feel like we're just going to keep plateauing, to be honest. I don't know. That's a big statement. I get it. I just made it back.
And I think the scary part that underpins all of that is that you could mention any topic right now, random, completely random. I could type it into Google, and we'll get every article, every opinion, every piece of information based around that. What needs to be recognised is that if we both Googled it, and if we both shared our screens, we'd have different results showing side by side. So all of a sudden now, this echo chamber that we live in, of these devices that we lean so heavily upon, one thing that Google hasn't done is allowed me to be able to jump in and say, what would you like to search for today? And say, who am I? The scary part to that is that Google knows. That they already know
to a point.
Yep. Like they have literally been measuring all of my activity. And for anyone who's listening, you can actually do this very easily. Be able to get the report from Google that has all the data that they store from you. So you can submit that across, and they'll send it to you. It's a big file, I warn you, if you've been on Google for a while and using a Gmail address. So definitely. But what that does, it scares you into knowing that the assumptions that they're making on who you are scarily accurate. It knew my age, which let's assume they kind of got that from somewhere I put a birth date in. But even religious upbringing, my political inclinations, like this level of kind of understanding of myself. A statement to say something that requires you a moment just to ponder upon is that computers now know you better than you know yourself. That's kind of scary when we rely so much on technology, and if we're completely blind to that fact, then all we're seeing is that level of influence coming through that's reinforcing. And we're all aware of that kind of. You look at something like Black Lives Matter and some of these big sort of history that are happening, and you see these people fighting, and they're talking about the same thing, yet they're not agreeing, and it's because they're living in these echo chambers of kind of the information that they're fed. They believe that the world is seeing the same information in the same way, and I learned that a long time ago that if you want to be able to move into any kind of if you're feeling hard done by, you need to recognize that the other person has made a decision based on the best information available to them and for the best outcome for them. And when you stop to realize that you're also making decisions in the same way, that it's not an attack against you, it's not they're purely just making it with the information that's available to them and the best outcome. Now, if that information is different for both you and I, then we're going to make different decisions inside of it that we feel are justified. So without that level of emotional intelligence, which starts with self-awareness and self-regulation, then all we're going to get is that level of influence coming through without actually being able to understand how to position that in the context of what's real and what's not. So
just to be able to filter and discern the information that's coming in. And I mean, look, that's a very different conversation that we could have. But teaching my clients body awareness and of emotional intelligence is massive, because one of my clients said to me recently, she goes, it's like I've got a bullshit meter now, like within me, that I just, something comes at me and I go, no, it doesn't feel right to me. But I also understand it doesn't have to feel right to everybody else either. So, that's one of the 4 agreements. Don't take anything personally. Boom. I mean, Okay, so I want to ask you then, because I feel like we're kind of moving towards this anyway, what would you say are the top 3 skills to learn as you begin a business?
Ooh.
I know, let's just narrow it down to 3. I know it's not fair, but I reckon there's a top 3.
Yeah, and we've probably touched on a few of the ideas already, but first and foremost, people first. So, understanding that, people buy people don't buy products. So, get used to storytelling. I think is probably tip number 1, that everything is built on storytelling. I almost feel that we need to add a piece of recognition around our, we have that Indigenous acknowledgement piece at the start of all formal events where we acknowledge our, our Aboriginal heritage, emerging leaders, past, present, and coming through. But I think that level of when you look at innovation at that level, that some of these cultures had. I mean, look, the boomerang, the step back and kind of have that ability to be able to say, okay, I need to hunt. I need to hunt at a distance. I need to throw something to hunt at a distance. I don't want to have to run and chase that every time I'm. So why don't I make something that I can set at a distance, throw, and have come back to me? That is mind-blowing to think that somebody went through that process, developed that, and it's something so unique to our culture and conditions and environment. So, and I'm using this example, I'll kind of build the 3 pieces into the example piece of what I'm saying, but that piece around kind of looking at things in terms of, well, what problems need to be solved, and the solution that I'm building here, is it more than just my problem? So first and foremost with that people piece is that, understanding that the very first thing you need to do is start talking to others, because if you start sort of building in this little kind of closed world of confirmation bias, you'll end up building something that'll be great for yourself, but not necessary for the rest of the world. So, so there's that first piece of sort of problem solution and how that fits in. But I'll bring up that example with the Aboriginal piece, that level of storytelling, and that ability to be able to kind of convey a message across, and to have a narrative piece, and to have the classic archetypes of character plays in there. If you look at the spiritual connotations that they put upon animals and places and people, and you look at the stories that sit behind that and what is trying to be told in those stories, you've really got to respect that, because there was lessons that they were trying to get across to people, that the best way to do that was to do that by giving examples of the world that we see around us. So storytelling at its best was done, so we automatically default to that. I've got to be a content creator. I've got to jump on TikTok. I've got to do a silly dance. I've got to get attention. You don't, you just, your storytelling ability, needs to be first and foremost to that. And it doesn't require, fancy, kind of technology or the next new platform to make that happen. It's about connection with people. So yeah, I'll sort of talk about that innovation piece, and I'll talk about that storytelling piece, but community and collaboration. If you look at how these tribes existed for thousands and thousands of years before we came and thought that we could do it better, the way that they did that was community and collaboration. And so ultimately that was about well, how do we work together on this? If you're doing this a hunter-gatherer piece, that however you want to break that down, but it was that recognition of roles, recognition of we're all playing a piece, a sum of parts, but we have a responsibility within that, all of those sort of different pieces around everything that's represented within that is part of that scaling of a business, is part of that growing. How do you go from just a small idea into that a collective of 20 staff and 1,000 customers and turning over $1 million a year? And you can't do that without considering what role does everyone play within that? How do we connect? How do we collaborate? How do we make that work? So I'd say, short answer is to not make up new rules today, is to look back at the rules from thousands of years ago and apply those to business today, and say that it's ultimately about storytelling without chasing the next new shiny thing. It's ultimately about innovation in terms of viewing the world with problems that need to be solved collectively, and not just for your own sort of selfish endeavour. And the third part is community, culture, and connection, and collaboration. All of the C's. We've already mentioned the other C word of COVID, so we'll stick with all the other C's to change.
The good C's. Let's stick with the great C's.
The good C's, yeah. And I'll put Chris in there as well. That's also.
I love it. That's perfect. But you're right though, because community has, for me anyway, from a personal perspective, and I know, in my community, because it is becoming such an important thing, that was one of the things that really highlighted to me. I thought, oh, great, I've got this amazing community. But actually, when I stopped and looked, I thought, whoa, I need to take another look at this. And, I actually did Aboriginal studies in year 11 and 12. I loved it. I had the privilege of spending time with elders. It's something that I always go back to. I just had a client that actually is in Aboriginal culture, and, that's something she's developing in her life. So that was amazing for that to emerge during working with her and hearing about, that stuff and her spiritual connection. But you're so right, though. When we can look back just into the tribal basic life, man, I gotta say, they knew their shit, man. Like, they knew what they were doing. And I just look at what we've done and think, and I've said this to you before, we haven't evolved. Like, I'm sorry, I know that we think we have, but that's very egotistical. We actually, at a soul level, haven't evolved. Still running on the mouse wheel. So, I love it, the storytelling and coming to that community, because community also keeps you honest. It also keeps you grateful, and it also keeps you grounded and compassionate, and because it keeps you authentic, because your community knows you and they call you on your shit. They also help you own your shit and move through it, and there's lots of stuff that they can do. But that's beautiful. Thank you so much for your time. It's always amazing. Love the conversations that we have, and I've even taken little notes for myself today, so thanks for that. Big thumbs up. But I always end with asking you the final 3 whats. So would that be okay we do that?
Go for it. Yeah,
beautiful. So what is well-being to you?
That is actually tougher than what you say, and I say this because I worked in wellbeing, but working with the Mayo Clinic specifically on that wellbeing piece, their clinical definition of wellbeing is very different to what I would kind of consider it to be. But I think for me, in one word, so ignore all that babble I just gave you: alignment.
It's so true. Yes. All right. What are your must-do well-being practices? Daily well-being practices.
Pack, unpack, and pause.
They're good ones. And what impact does it have on your life, having a well-being focus?
I was about to say, very timely question in the context of what's just happened with Shane Warne and that piece around 52 years old, just passed away. The sense of mortality that comes certainly from anyone who's male, pale and stale like myself. Someone like like Shane Warne, passing away at 52 makes you sit back and kind of look and think, wow, that's what happens if you live life in full rock star mode, for a while. That's a young age to go. Yeah, for somebody who was at the peak of his sport, considered to be, the best of what he did for a time, to then be passing away at that level of age. I think there's a lot of people in the same sort of age bracket as myself sitting back over the last few days, just sort of taking pause on that. And the sense of mortality that comes from it is not just the lifestyle decision that you need to make underneath that, but I think it's also that recognition of just how short life is. Just that piece of just how fragile everything is and how quickly it can go, and ultimately, what are we saying? It's not about taking more, it's about giving more. And when you finally kind of get to that piece around, oh wow, that feels right, that actually makes me feel kind of warm and fuzzy inside, then you know where you're meant to be and kind of where that's meant to go. So that's unpacking it a little bit further, but I think that's
I love it.
The context of where the news has just come out on that. It's I think it's time for us to all pause and kind of just consider those pieces.
I often have great little thoughts walking my dog most mornings, and it was literally about, and I asked myself this question: am I enjoying my life? Is there something more that I could do to enjoy it? Not at the cost of anyone else, but we are born to enjoy ourselves and our life. So do whatever you can to do that, not to step on anybody else, or, because if you're enjoying your life, it's not going to be negatively impacting anybody else. And it'll come with a great sense of well-being and a great sense of success. That's another conversation entirely what that is.
Another conversation,
yeah, but I love that. Thank you so much. I mean, look, you're always so generous. And what I do appreciate is, because I talk about a lot of this in my business, is there's a lot of masculine, feminine coming out, but the true aspect of what that is. So I do want to honor the fact that you sit in your beautiful masculine so wonderfully and share so authentically and sit in a vulnerability and be so open about who you are, where you are, and what you do. Absolutely. I just want to honor that from me to you, Chris, because that's amazing. So if you're listening or you're watching today, absolutely, this is a really beautiful connected conversation sitting in a great balance of yin and yang, which is phenomenal. Thank you so much for your time. It's been brilliant.
Thanks so much. Yes.
Thanks so much for sharing your time with us today. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. Please remember to like and share and comment below and subscribe. And I'll look forward to seeing you next time on Connected Conversations. Bye for now. Chris and the Innovation Crowd, please find the link in the bio or head to the City of Casey website. To connect with me, head to emmamuir.com. Enjoy your day and thanks for sharing your time.